Hi guys, so now we've been talking about transported materials in and out of cells and then in and out of systems within the human body and mammalian bodies. So now we want to start looking at how do these different types of transport impact plants. Do that, sorry. Okay, so materials that need to be transported in plants. You've got water and minerals, sugars, and gases. Water and minerals, remember, are transported in the xylem. Xylem goes from the roots up to the tippy top of the tree, so it's xylem. And remember that it's transpiration that's causing that material to be pulled up. And because it's being pulled up, we call that negative pressure. Right? Sugars also have to be transported through the plant. It's transported in the phloem. Remember, since the sugars move really slowly, we call it phloem. Okay? It moves through a process called bulk flow. And we call that positive pressure because it's pushing the sugars through the plant. The last thing that really needs to be transported in plants is gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide. In photosynthesis, plants need to take in CO2 and so they can use it to build sugars and then get rid of oxygen as a byproduct. And that happens in the leaves through the stomates, which is the plural of stomata, which are the holes that are on the underside of the leaves. But then the roots also have to be able to do respiration. Roots get in sugar, they need to convert it to ATP. So at the roots, they need to take in oxygen and get rid of CO2. Okay? Roots exchange their gases with the air spaces in the soil. So there needs to be air around the leaves that the gases can exist in. So why does overwatering a plant kill it? Because it literally drowns the plant. There are no then any air spaces for the gases to exist. The plant can't get in any oxygen, can't produce ATP in its roots, and the plant dies. All right, so let's remember, how is it that materials move through the xylem? It's all about transpiration. We've talked about this before, so for a reminder, transpiration is the evaporation of water out of the leaves. So you've got your water molecules in the leaf. As the leaf gets heated, some of those water molecules are going to be converted to vapor, and they'll move out through the stomata, through those openings. As one water molecule moves out, because of hydrogen bonding, it's going to pull the next one in the chain with it, and then pull and pull and pull in a big long line all the way down to the roots. So that it's pulling the water up through the plant. Okay? Water is absorbed from the soil through osmosis, moves into the cells of the roots through aquaporins. Okay, so we've got a nice little pictures here of our root. Remember, the roots are covered in root hairs that help increase the surface area so that there's more places at which absorption can happen. As it moves in, it's going to literally move into the cells of the xylem through these openings called aquaporins. Those are the specific cells, the specific types of openings in cells that allow water through. Once the water gets into the xylem cells, then transpiration is going to pull it up through those xylems. All right, all the way up to the leaf. Okay, then mineral absorption. Most of the minerals that are needed by the plant come in by active transport in some way, shape, or form, using proton pumps. And so the plant actively transports hydrogen ions, and then that allows for other materials to come in. So how does that work? All right. So plants actively transport hydrogen ions out of the cells at the roots. Okay? This creates a hydrogen gradient. So there's all these hydrogens in the extracellular fluid and not many on the inside. So that's going to create a membrane potential where it's more positive outside and negative inside, a difference in charge. That's going to make it really easy for any positive ions to move into the cells, okay, because positives are attracted to negatives. Well, what about the negative materials that the plant needs to move in, like NO3. NO3 is a negative molecule, and plants need an enormous amount of nitrogen. So how are those going to get in? Well, the hydrogen ions now are going to, because there's so many of them outside, it's just going to happen naturally that they diffuse back into the cell. Well, as they diffuse back into the cell, they're going to carry negative ions in with them. It's called co-transport. So positive ions come in because of the change in charge. Negative ions are co-transported in by the hydrogens. All right, once water gets into the root, it's got to get into the root and all the way to the xylem. If you remember your plant anatomy, the xylem is going to be somewhere near the middle of the root. So the water's got to move quite a distance first, all right? The cell walls at the edge of the root are going to be porous, and they're going to be able to flow, and that's going to allow water to start coming in. Okay? So there's a couple different ways that water can move through the plant to get to the xylem. So when water gets into the plant, it's got a couple different pathways that it can take to get from the outside all the way to the xylem. And we give those different ways that it can move different names. So it could be the apoplastic route. So if you look here, this is the apoplastic route. It's highlighted in pink. Water moves in, and then it literally moves along the cell wall, all the way along the cell wall until it gets to the middle. Or it can move through the cell wall, through the cell membrane, and then through the cells. And then in between, from cell to cell, there are these openings in plant cells called plasmodesmata. We'll talk about that word again. Okay? And then it moves through the cells till it gets to the middle. Now here's the problem. If the water moves by the apoplastic route, and only by the apoplastic route, it only ever goes through the cell wall. Remember, the cell wall is not selectively permeable. So that would mean if there was a straight shot from apoplastic route straight into the xylem, anything and everything that came into contact with the plant could get into the xylem, and same thing with your bloodstream. As soon as it's in there, it can move anywhere in your body. So as soon as there's something into the xylem, it could get anywhere in the tree. So that's not a good thing. So in order to prevent materials from coming in that way, the plant has this specialized structure on the inside called the endodermis, and those endodermis cells are surrounded by a Casparian strip. Let's look at that. Okay. So the Casparian strip is an impermeable lining that goes around each cell of the endodermis. And the water, once it hits that Casparian strip, it's like hitting a brick wall. It cannot go through. And it is then forced to go through the cell membrane, and then selective permeability happens, so some things are going to be kicked out. Going to go through only the good stuff, only the stuff that the plant wants to let in is going to get in, and then it can go into the xylem and get everywhere else. Okay, so that allows the plant to keep out things that it doesn't need. Again, we're looking at structure and function. The plant needs some way of keeping things out, and look, it's got a structure that allows it to do that function. Very cool. All right, so again, here's your picture of a root anatomy. So in a dicot, you've got the endodermis here, surrounding the cross of vascular tissue, and in a monocot you've got the endodermis here surrounding all the bubbles, all the circles of vascular tissue. There's your endodermis, and there's your endodermis. Okay? To help plants get in more water and minerals, many plants have a symbiotic relationship with a type of fungi called Mycorrhizae. There you go. Mycorrhizae. And it's a fungus that grows on the roots, and it creates an enormous hair thread structure all around, and it increases the surface area of the roots enormously, and then it gives it more surface that it can pull in water, pull in minerals, allows the plants to grow much more efficiently. Okay, so here's mycorrhizae. You can see how they're growing. Here's a whole sheath of fungi growing over a root. Look at the enormous amount of surface area that they're creating there. So the mycorrhizae grow on the outside, and then they also start to grow into the plant to help get the materials into the plant even faster. All right, so that's water and minerals. Let's start talking about sugars. Remember, sugars are transported in the phloem. Okay, and remember, the sugars are made at the leaves, and then they get shuffled into the phloem through cells, and they get into the phloem and they move via the plasmodesmata. So there's that word I used before, plasmodesmata. Okay, and those are the openings in the cell walls between cells, so that the materials don't have to go through the cell membrane, through the cell wall, through the next cell wall, through the next cell membrane to keep going. It can just go cell to cell straight through. Makes for a more efficient route. Okay, you've got proton pumps that are going to help really pump sucrose down its proton gradient and into these cells of the phloem to really get it moving as fast as possible. Okay, so this is the bulk flow or mass flow hypothesis, going from source to sink. So let's see if we can watch the little video on this.
Leaves are making sugars that are being stocked. It's summer, and this plant's leaves are making sugars that are being stockpiled in its taproot. A tissue called phloem transports the organic products of photosynthesis throughout the plant in a solution called phloem sap. This process is called translocation. In the summer, which part of the plant is the sugar source? Click on the sugar source.
So remember, the sugar source is going to be the part of the plant that has the most amount of sugar. So in the summer, that's going to be the leaves, because that's where photosynthesis is happening and they're making sugar.
Correct. The leaves are the sugar source, producing sugar via photosynthesis. Click on the part of the plant that is the sugar sink in summer.
So what is the part of the plant that's going to be storing sugar for the plant? Well, in the summer, it's going to be
correct. Since the taproot is storing sugars, it is the sugar sink.
Sugar produced by the leaves is pumped into the sieve tube members of the phloem by active transport. This raises the concentration of sugar, causing water to move into the phloem by osmosis. Water pressure at the sugar source increases, pushing water and sugar away from the sugar source and toward the sugar sink, a process called bulk flow. At the sugar sink, root cells remove sugar by active transport and convert the sugar into starch. Again, water follows by osmosis. This lowers the water pressure at the sink. Thus, the phloem transports water and its sugar cargo from the sugar source in the leaves, where there is a buildup of pressure, to the sugar sink in the root, where the pressure is lower.
Okay, so but again, it's active transport that's going to be used in both these locations, both at the sugar source, actively transporting sugar out so that a lot of sugar moves out at once, and then once you get to the sink, actively transporting the sugar in so a lot of sugar can get into the sink. Now remember, phloem cells, they have those sieve tube plates. The plates in between them, which are like a big plate with a bunch of holes in it. Okay, that restricts the pure, fresh, just easy movement through the phloem. It's not like the xylem where it's just a big, huge open straw. It's got these plates in it. That's going to allow the plant to build up even more pressure and really push the sugar through the phloem.
Now the weather is changing. In autumn, the plant's leaves die and its metabolic processes slow down. The plant is dormant during the winter. In early spring, new leaves begin to grow. Click on the part of the plant that is now the sugar source.
All right, so in order for leaves to grow, they need a source of energy. So they're going to get that from...
Correct. The taproot is the sugar source. Its stored sugars are transported to the leaves where they are used for growth. In the early spring, which part of the plant is the sugar sink? Click on the sugar sink.
So where is the sugar going to? It's going to the leaves where it's needed.
Correct. Rapid growth of the leaves requires more sugar than they can produce through photosynthesis. Early in the spring, the leaves are the sugar sink.
And remember, they're not able to do photosynthesis that quickly because they're really little, because they're just growing.
In the spring, the direction is reversed, but the mechanism responsible for the translocation of phloem sap is the same. Sugar in the taproot is actively transported into the phloem. Water flows into the phloem by osmosis, increasing the water pressure. In the leaves, sugar is actively transported out of the phloem and water follows. Pressure flow drives water and sugar away from the sugar source and toward the sugar sink.
Okay, so hopefully that description of bulk flow makes sense. Back to our PowerPoint here. Okay, so it's moving from source to sink, and it's active transport of sucrose into the phloem to make sure that there's a whole lot of sucrose being moved at once. Water is going to follow it by osmosis, building up the pressure, and then really pushing the sugar to the source. To the sink, which is going to hold it. All right, so how did we get the idea that this bulk flow was really happening? Well, it's a slightly cruel experiment, but we've used it. So aphids are a type of bug that have a proboscis, or a stylet, it's called, that they put into the plant and that they put into the phloem so they can get sugar out of the plant. Well, we wondered, was the aphid sucking the sugar out, or if bulk flow is true, the aphid is now a low pressure location that there is a low concentration of sugar. So if bulk flow is true, then the plant should push sugar into the aphid. So in order to figure out if that was true, what we did is we let an aphid put its little stylet into a plant and then removed the aphid and just left the stylet there. I know it seems kind of cruel, but they're bugs. It happens. And then we noticed that sap droplets then started to form and drop, form and drop, form and drop. So that means that the sugar is being pushed to that location rather than just slowly getting there by pure diffusion. Okay? We use bulk flow also to help us do maple sugaring. With maple sugaring, you take a drill and you drill into the plant. And remember, since phloem is on the outside, when you drill in, the first thing you get to is the phloem. Okay? If you put, if you put a little opening in there, you're going to get the plant to start pumping sugar out that location. And you can start getting the phloem. Okay, it's a great thing. You put your pails outside the trees. They have to sit for a couple of months. You collect a whole bunch of phloem sap, and then you got to boil it down like crazy. And sometimes it's almost a 40-to-1 ratio of what you need. You take 40 gallons of phloem sap, and you can make 1 gallon of syrup out of it. So it takes a lot. All right, I hope that makes sense for plant nutrition. See you next, plant transport. See you next time.